Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by asking you a question, and I want you to be completely honest. How often do you feel just totally exhausted by the effort of trying to be a decent person?
Man, that is a heavy way to start a Tuesday.
It is, yeah, but think about it. It feels like a constant negotiation, right? You wake up and you have this list of things you want to do.
Right, like sleep in.
Exactly. Sleep in, make some money, maybe be a little selfish with your time. But then you have this other list of things you know you ought to do. Be kind, be generous, work hard. Don't lose your temper at the guy who just cut you off in traffic.
Oh, it's the treadmill. You run and run trying to balance your own desires with your duties, and you never actually get anywhere.
Yes, and usually you just feel like you're failing at both. You're not having as much fun as the totally selfish people, and you're not as saintly as the genuinely good people. You're just you're stuck.
Well, today we are going to look at that exact struggle. But we aren't looking at it through, a self-help book or some new productivity hack. We are diving straight into the writings of C.S. Lewis.
And actually, per a specific request from a listener, we're going to take this slowly today. We're putting aside any academic jargon, and we're just going to break down C.S. Lewis's arguments really simply.
I love that approach.
Yeah, because his use of analogies is just brilliant. He argues that the reason we are so exhausted is that we are trying to do something literally impossible.
Right.
We are trying to improve ourselves when what is actually required is something much, much more radical.
It's the difference between painting a rock and turning that rock into a flower. I mean, one is just surface improvement, but the other is total transformation.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. Lewis starts by describing the way most of us, even highly religious people, approach this whole idea of being good. He calls it the ordinary self. How does he break that down?
He describes it almost like a business arrangement. Or, well, he uses this great analogy of a taxpayer.
A taxpayer. Okay, break that down for us, nice and slow.
Sure. So imagine you are a decent, law-abiding citizen. You earn your money, you own your house, and then the government comes along and says, you owe us 30%.
Okay, nobody likes that, but sure.
Right, but you pay it. You might even pay it cheerfully. But, and this is the absolute key detail here, you view the rest of that money as yours.
Right. I paid my dues, I paid the tax, now leave me alone to spend the rest how I want.
Exactly. And Lewis argues that most people treat morality the exact same way. We view our lives, our time, and our so-called self as our own private property.
Right.
So we are perfectly willing to pay the tax of good deeds. We'll give to charity, we'll volunteer on a Saturday, we'll try our best not to lie.
But we do it hoping that there's a payoff.
Yes, we do it with the specific hope that once we've paid that moral tax, there will be enough time and energy left over for us to just live our own lives, to keep the self completely intact.
Honestly, that sounds pretty normal. I think that's how I operate most days. What is the actual problem with that?
The problem, according to Lewis, is that it just doesn't work. It inevitably leads to a breakdown. Because the tax authority, whether you call that your conscience or society or God, it keeps raising the rates.
How so? Like the demands just keep growing.
Exactly. The more you try to obey your conscience, the more it demands of you. Today, it's don't lie. Tomorrow, it's don't be proud. The next day, it's love your enemy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if you are viewing this as a tax on your personal freedom, you eventually just run out of funds. You go spiritually bankrupt.
So what happens then when you hit that bankruptcy?
Lewis says you essentially hit a fork in the road. Either you give up completely and say, this whole morality stuff is a sham, it's too hard, or you become something much worse. You become a martyr.
A martyr? You mean like someone who literally dies for a cause?
No, I mean the domestic martyr.
What?
The person who keeps paying the tax but resents every single penny of it.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
Right. They are always loudly living for others, but they are grumpy, unhappy, and constantly wondering why nobody appreciates their massive sacrifices.
Yeah, Lewis has this biting line where he says that once you become that person, you are a far greater pest to anyone who has to live with you than you would have been if you had just stayed, frankly, selfish.
It's so true. We all know that person. The one who cleans the kitchen but sighs loudly the whole time so everyone in the house knows exactly how much they're suffering.
Yes. That is the end result of the taxpayer model. An unhappy saint is an absolute disaster to be around.
They really are.
Okay, so if the taxpayer model is broken, if we can't just pay our dues and keep the rest of our time and energy for ourselves, what is the Christian alternative Lewis is pointing to? Because the alternative sounds like we lose everything.
Well, in Lewis's view, the alternative is basically a hostile takeover.
A hostile takeover.
Yeah, it's not about paying taxes anymore. It's about a complete change in ownership. And he uses a gardening analogy here, the tree.
Okay, explain the tree.
He says that Christ isn't interested in just pruning a branch here and there. He doesn't want to just fix your bad temper or your laziness like a mechanic swapping out a bad car part. He wants the whole tree down.
The whole tree. But what about the good branches?
Everything. Lewis writes that Christ isn't saying, hand over your bad habits and I'll fix them. He's saying, hand over the whole natural self. The bad stuff, yes, absolutely, but also the good stuff.
Like what?
Your ambition, your desire for comfort, your very identity. The quote is, I have not come to torment your natural self, but to kill it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not about drilling a cavity in a tooth. It's about pulling the whole tooth out.
See, that is exactly where I think a lot of people just get off the bus. That sounds terrifying. It sounds like losing who you are.
It is terrifying, and Lewis fully admits that, but he argues that it's the only actual way to get what we truly want. He compares it to a field of grass.
Okay, the grass versus weed analogy. Let's break that one down.
Right. So you can cut a field of grass as short as you want. You can water it, you can fertilize it, you can treat it perfectly. But at the end of the day, it's still grass.
It's never going to produce wheat.
Exactly. If you want wheat, you have to completely plow up the grass. You have to destroy the existing crop to plant the new one.
So improvement is just cutting the grass.
Yeah.
Transformation is plowing the entire field.
Improvement is surface level, like a fresh coat of paint. Transformation is deep, like a dye or a stain that alters the actual material.
Okay, I get the difference, but I really have to push back here. You said earlier that trying to be good is exhausting.
Yeah, the treadmill.
Right. But this, giving up your whole self, that sounds infinitely harder. How can Lewis possibly argue that this radical, terrifying demand is actually the solution to our exhaustion?
Yeah.
Because he explicitly says this is an easier yoke, right?
He does, and this is the core paradox of his whole argument. It's the part that really blew my mind when I first read it. He claims that total surrender is actually easier than moderate compromise.
That makes zero sense. Giving 100% is harder than giving 50%. That's just basic math.
In math, sure, but in psychology and spiritual life, not at all. Let's look at his lazy boy analogy.
Okay, lay it on me.
Lewis talks about a student in a geometry class. There's a diligent student who struggles to actually understand the core theorem. That's really hard work initially.
Right, wrapping your head around the actual concepts.
Exactly. But then there's lazy boy who just memorizes the formula to save time. He takes a shortcut because it feels easier in the moment.
I have definitely been that lazy boy.
Oh, we all have. But what happens? 6 months later, the final exam comes around. The diligent student breezes through it because he actually understands how the math works. The lazy boy is now in a total nightmare.
Because he forgot the formulas.
Right. He has to memorize dozens of disconnected formulas. He doesn't know how they relate. He's stressed. He's failing. The easy way turned out to be the hardest possible path.
Okay, I see that. But how does a geometry test apply to everyday morality?
Think about the massive mental load of moderation. Let's say you're trying to be good, but you also want to keep your own desires as the absolute priority. You are constantly negotiating.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Every single time a temptation comes up to cheat on your taxes, to gossip, to snap at your spouse, you have to make a decision. Do I give in this time? How about just a little bit? Is this bad enough to actually count?
It's a constant haggle. You're just arguing with yourself all day long.
Exactly, and that haggling is what makes you so exhausted. Lewis compares it to a man trying to be a drunkard and a teetotaler at the exact same time. It's impossible. It is practically easier to be completely sober than to try and have just one drink every day if you're a severe alcoholic.
Because the decision is already made. You don't have to debate it every single time you see a bottle.
Right. When you hand over the whole self, that exhausting debate stops. You aren't managing 1,000 unruly desires anymore. You've just handed the keys to the house over to someone else entirely. Lewis says the perfect safety is only in the immediate danger.
He compares it to a battle, right? Or being on a mountain.
Yeah, if you are a coward in battle, the most dangerous thing you can do is run away. That's when you get shot in the back. The safest place, paradoxically, is often charging straight at the enemy line. It takes way more courage for one terrifying second, but it leads to safety.
The easy choice of running away actually leads to greater danger.
Exactly. Or think about his practical example of just waking up in the morning.
The morning routine. I love this one.
You wake up, and
Mm.
immediately the wild animals of your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you. I need to do this. I want to do that. I'm stressed about this email.
Oh, yeah. The to-do list just crashes down on you before you even open your eyes.
Right. And Lewis says the real work of Christianity isn't fighting each of those animals individually. The work is shoving them all back, just for a second, to let that other, stronger, quieter life flow in.
So the exhaustion I feel isn't because I'm trying too hard to be good. It's
Yeah.
actually because I'm not trying hard enough. Or rather, because I'm trying to do two totally incompatible things at once.
Precisely. You are trying to serve two masters. You are trying to keep yourself on the throne while also trying to obey God. And Lewis says that isn't just difficult, it's practically impossible. It's a design flaw. The human machine simply isn't built to run that way.
Okay, so let's say I buy that. I'm ready to stop the haggling. I'm ready to hand over the keys. But then I run into another massive wall.
Which is?
The fear of what happens next. Because if I hand myself over to God, well, God seems to have extraordinarily high standards.
Be ye perfect.
Exactly. That specific command. It sounds like a total setup for failure. I don't want to be perfect. I just want to be decent. I'm not trying to be a saint here. I just want to stop yelling at my kids so much.
And this is where Lewis drops the dentist analogy. And I really think this is one of the most relatable things he ever wrote.
The dentist. Okay, let's hear it.
Yes, Lewis talks about having a terrible toothache as a child. He was in real pain, but he absolutely refused to tell his mother.
Wow.
Because he knew she would give him aspirin, which is exactly what he wanted. He just wanted the pain to stop so he could go to sleep. But he also knew she would do something else.
She would take him to the dentist the next morning.
Right. And Lewis writes, I knew those dentists. If you gave them an inch, they took an L.
They don't just fix the one thing.
Exactly. The dentist wouldn't just fix the one tooth that was actually hurting. He would start poking around at all the other teeth, the ones that hadn't even started hurting yet. He would start drilling and scraping and doing a full treatment.
That is the perfect description of going to the doctor. You go in for a weird cough, and they find 10 other issues you really didn't want to know about.
And Lewis argues that God is exactly like that dentist. We go to him crying for aspirin. We say, God, please help me with my temper, or God, help me stop drinking.
Yeah.
We just want the immediate pain of that specific sin to go away so we can get back to our normal, comfortable lives.
Right, we want quick relief, not a massive root canal.
Oh, exactly. But God basically says, okay, I'll fix the temper. But while I'm in here, I'm also going to fix the pride and the greed and the deep fear and the selfishness. He completely refuses to do a half job. He intends to make you literally perfect.
That feels invasive.
It is totally invasive. It's the hostile takeover we talked about earlier. But Lewis makes a really crucial distinction here that brings a lot of comfort, I think. He distinguishes between a father being pleased and a father being satisfied.
What's the difference there?
He borrows a concept from George MacDonald. Think about a baby learning to walk. When the baby takes 2 incredibly wobbly steps and then falls flat on its face, the father is absolutely delighted. He's pleased. He's not angry that the baby fell.
Sure, he's cheering and clapping.
Right. But the father is not satisfied. He won't be fully satisfied until that baby grows into a man who can walk miles with a firm, free, manly step. He totally accepts the stumble today, but he loves the child way too much to let him stay a stumbling baby forever.
So God is easy to please, but hard to satisfy.
That's the exact takeaway. God is easy to please, but hard to satisfy. He accepts your feeble, messy efforts today, but he has a grand vision for your ultimate perfection, and he will never, ever rest until he gets you there.
But what if I don't want to be perfect? What if I genuinely am okay with just being an ordinary, decent chap?
Lewis says that simply isn't an option on the table. He uses a biological evolution analogy here. Think of a bird's egg.
An egg, okay.
An egg can't just decide to stay a decent ordinary egg forever. It either hatches into a bird or it goes rotten. There is no magical third option where it just stays a nice, comfortable egg on the counter for 10 years.
It literally has to change or die.
Right. Or
Yeah.
think of a human embryo. At one point, we all looked like weird little fish or vegetables in the womb. If we had a voice back then, we might have said, you know what, I'm really comfortable in here. I don't want to change.
But the plan was always to become a fully formed human baby.
Exactly. Shrinking back from that isn't humility, it's just laziness. Lewis argues that we are destined to become what he calls gods and goddesses, dazzling creatures pulsating with immense power and joy. Refusing that destiny is like a child refusing to grow up because he doesn't want to stop playing in the mud.
Okay, so we have to grow. We have to be transformed. But what does that actually feel like in the moment? Because becoming a dazzling creature sounds great in theory, but in practice, daily life is often it's hard. There's suffering, loss, deep confusion. How does Lewis reconcile that pain with this process?
This brings us to the absolute climax of his argument, the central visualization that ties all of this together, the living house.
Yes, this is my absolute favorite analogy of his. Break this down for the listener.
Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you totally understand what he is doing. He fixes the drains, he stops the leaks in the roof.
Right, the obvious stuff. Fixing the visible sins that were making your life miserable anyway.
Right. You knew those jobs needed to be done, and you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense at all.
He starts taking down load-bearing walls.
Exactly. He's building a new wing over here, putting up an extra floor there, running up towers, making grand courtyards. You thought you were just being made into a decent little cottage.
But he has entirely other plans.
Lewis says you thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself.
Wow. That completely reframes the concept of suffering, doesn't it?
It really does. The hammering, the dust, the walls being violently knocked down, that's the suffering we feel in life. If you think you're just supposed to be a nice cottage, the construction seems violent and totally pointless. Why destroy a perfectly good wall?
Right.
But if you realize he's actually building a palace, the violence suddenly makes sense. The structure literally has to be reinforced to hold the immense weight of glory.
He's making room for himself.
Yes. And this is where we really need to zoom out, because up until now, we've been talking mostly about my morality, my personal struggle, my perfection. But Lewis ends this whole argument by blowing the scope wide open. He asks, what is the point of all this? Why does God want a universe full of these palaces?
Yeah, why go to all this immense trouble?
Lewis calls it the concept of little Christs. He says that the entire purpose of becoming a Christian is nothing less than to become a little Christ. And he makes a really stark, provocative comparison between the state and the church.
Oh, right. This is so interesting. He basically says the state, meaning government, nations, economies, exists for something actually very small.
Yes. He says the state exists simply to allow ordinary people to live ordinary, happy lives. To chat by the fire, to play darts in a pub, to raise families. That is the highest possible goal of politics and government. Just ordinary happiness.
Oh, the church is entirely different.
The church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them into these little Christs. If the church, with all its clergy, its missions, its grand cathedrals, and Sunday sermons, if it isn't doing that, then all the rest is a complete waste of time.
That is a very stark metric.
It is. Lewis says God isn't just looking for a set of rules to be blindly followed. He is looking for a mirror.
A mirror. Explain that.
He wants to fill the entire universe with creatures who are so permeated by his light, so completely plowed up and transformed like that wheat field, that they act as bright, stainless mirrors. They perfectly reflect his power and delight back to him.
So the end goal isn't just to be a nice person. The goal is to be a vessel.
Exactly. And this is where the vision gets truly cosmic. And honestly, this is the part that almost always gets left out of the conversation when people talk about C.S. Lewis. He suggests that this radical transformation doesn't just stop with us.
What do you mean by that?
He hints that perhaps the higher animals and plants and even dead things like minerals and nature itself are actually drawn into eternity through us.
Wait, through us? Like my dog gets to heaven because of me.
In a profound sense, yes. Think about how a dog becomes more human because a human loves it. It learns to respond to your voice, to show complex affection. It enters a much higher world purely through its relationship with you. Lewis wonders if we are the bridgeheads for the redemption of all nature.
That is wild to think about.
If we are the little Christs, then when we are finally healed and transformed into palaces, the nature connected to us, our pets, our gardens, the physical world we touch gets healed too. We are literally the vessel for the redemption of the entire universe.
Man, that is a very long way from just, I should really try to stop swearing in traffic.
It is. But that's exactly the point. Lewis is trying to wake us up from the boring stupor of just trying to be good. He wants us to see that we are in the middle of a massive cosmic renovation.
So to bring this all back down to earth for you as we wrap up today, we started with the taxpayer, the exhausted person trying to negotiate with God. I'll give you Sundays, you let me keep the rest of the week.
Which naturally leads to the lazy boy paradox, the sheer exhaustion of trying to serve two completely different masters.
Right. And then we realized we are a living house.
Yeah.
The pain we feel isn't just meaningless destruction. It's the very loud sound of a palace being built.
A palace designed for God himself to inhabit.
It really changes the way you look at a bad day, doesn't it? If the goal is just personal comfort, a bad day is a total failure. But if the goal is a palace, a bad day might just be the construction crew arriving to do the hard work.
That's it exactly. We have to stop trying to be decent eggs we have to hatch. It's scary and it's messy, but it's the only way we'll ever learn to fly.
I think that is the perfect place to leave it. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into C.S. Lewis. I hope you go easy on yourself today. Or rather, I hope you stop trying to just pay the tax and finally hand over the keys. Think about what part of nature might be waiting for you to transform.
See you next time.